In the CosmereRPG, dropping to 0 hit points is not the end for your character. You are just unlocking a new amazing aspect of this game that will both excite and terrify you. On this CosmereRPG video, I'm going to talk about how your character gets injured, how they can die, and what classes you can play to keep death at bay. Hello, I am the Tabletop Optimist, and I really love the CosmereRPG and the forthcoming Plotweaver RPG made by the same company. And if you want to learn more about either of these games or other TTRPGs, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Now, let's talk about a topic that always makes me uncomfortable: death. In the CosmereRPG, your characters are a little bit more durable than other TTRPGs, and dying is something that is earned and not so easily given. One of the major differences in the CosmereRPG compared to others is dying almost completely relies on injuries you have taken before and is based not only what you roll, but other factors added or subtracted to the roll that you make. Let's start off with what does it actually take to die in the CosmereRPG. Simply put, if the result of your roll is -6 or lower after falling unconscious, your character dies. Now you may be asking, okay, how do I roll a -6 on a 20-sided die with no negatives? When your character's hit points fall to 0 and your character becomes unconscious, you will make a roll on the injury table. Injuries are either permanent or temporary effects to your character that will affect the results of your rolls most of the time. Now, how do you determine what injury you get and how long it lasts? When you fall unconscious, you always get an injury, but your roll result will determine what kind of injury and its length. When you fall unconscious, roll a d20 with no modifiers added for now. So I rolled a 12. Add the deflect value of your armor. Since my character is wearing a breastplate, my deflect value is 2. So currently I get to add 2 to my roll. Second, add any relevant modifiers from talents or abilities. Third, subtract 5 from your roll for each injury you already have. Since my character has no active injuries, I do not subtract anything from this roll. Now that we have the number, let's take a look at the injury duration and effects tables mentioned before. First up is injury duration. How this works is as follows. Once you've added and subtracted all requirements prior, this is what the results are. Like mentioned before, -6 or lower is death. -5 to 0 is a permanent injury. You suffer a permanent injury. If your result is a 1 to 5, you get a vicious injury. You suffer a temporary injury with a duration of 6d6 days. With a result of 6 to 15, that is a shallow injury. You suffer a temporary injury with a duration of 1d6 days. 16 plus is simply a flesh wound. You suffer a temporary injury until after a long rest. Now that is covering how long or severe the injury is, so let's move on to what kind of injury you get with the injury effect table. Once you get the injury effect table, roll a d8 and that will show you what kind of injury you have. 1 to 2 is exhausted -1. The -1 means you are going to subtract 1 from any of your rolls. And for a narrative suggestion, any injury that lowers your overall stamina. A 3 is exhausted -2. Subtract 2 from any roll that you make, like you did with the exhausted -1. If you roll a 4 to a 5, you are slowed. You can either have an injured leg or foot, or any injury that lowers your overall speed. If you roll a 6, that means you are disoriented. You could have an injured head or widespread injury that overwhelms your senses. If you roll a 7, that is surprised. You are overwhelmed by the shock of an injury, and if you roll an 8, you can only use one hand. You can either have an injured arm or hand specifically, or any injury that lowers your overall coordination. Injuries are such a fun inclusion in the game, but don't feel like you're forced to have that specific type of injury. In the book, it says if you suffered an injury that doesn't fit narratively, feel free to choose another one. Of course, before determining your injury, work with your GM to determine the injury that fits the story best. If you made a character with a pre-existing disability, make sure to check out the handbook, as it will give you great insights into how to roleplay injuries and how that will work with your character with a pre-existing disability. They explain it so much better than I can. Also, if you do suffer an injury that is either permanent or temporary, look up how people with that disability have adapted to their daily lives, so you can learn something interesting and portray that disability respectfully. Also, when you suffer a permanent injury, that does not mean you have to have that effect for the rest of the game. People are amazing, and one of our best abilities is that we adapt to what we experience in life. Work with your GM to figure out how to adapt to your character's disability. Using goals and rewards in this game is a great way to work towards adapting to your character's injury. Now, how exactly do we get rid of the temporary injuries affecting our characters? As I mentioned while showing the injury duration table, I said 6d6, 1d6, or a long rest. After you make those rolls and you have lasted past those amount of days, the injury is now gone. So let's say you roll a 1d6 and the result is a 4. After 4 in game days, you no longer have that temporary injury. Or if the result goes away after a long rest, then that is all you need to complete it. Now that we covered injuries, let's talk about what happens when the dice are not in your favor and your result is a -6 or lower, resulting in your character's death. When you are about to die, you can cling to consciousness just long enough to impart one last wisdom, make one last quip, or say one last goodbye. Pretty much anything that is leaving your party with one last thing to remember you by. There are a few locations in the Cosmere where a character would go when they die, but since this is not a Cosmere specific channel, I will not elaborate further due to the risk of spoiling for Cosmere readers. The handbook will give you more information on where characters will go if they die. Now, let's talk about how you come back from the dead. There is a sort of realm where you will be for a limited amount of time. While your soul still lingers there, you can be brought back through magical methods. Like I said before, work with your GM to find a way to bring back your character and what that entails. For our final topic, I'll be covering the classes that help with injuries and character death prevention. When you choose either the Truth Watcher or Edge Dancer Radiant classes, you get access to the Progression Surge. You get access to healing abilities that will let you help heal injuries and even death to willing characters. With the injury regrowth action, you can spend 2 investiture to cause a target to recover from a temporary injury, or spend 3 investiture to recover from a permanent one. Another skill from the Progression Surge is the talent From the Brink. With From the Brink, you can spend 3 investiture to restore life to a willing character who died within the last minute. These are 2 of the multiple talents that you can take in the Progression Surge. Make sure to check it out to see what talents you would like while you're playing a Radiant. And if you want to be a different Radiant or not a Radiant at all, make sure to check the Surgeon path in the Scholar Heroic Path table. Surgeon talent is Resuscitation. With Resuscitation, you can spend 3 focus when using the field medicine to revive an unconscious character or one who died recently. And you can remove a condition caused by an injury with Ongoing Care. With Ongoing Care, you gain a mental health care expertise. During a rest, test medicine with a DC of 10 to treat an ally, removing one condition caused by their injury. Ultimately, death in the CosmereRPG is not super common for the player characters. Unless you have had really bad luck, your character will not die unless you have already succumbed to multiple injuries. The death and injury mechanics in the CosmereRPG are probably one of my favorite aspects of this entire game. Injury Side really shows how much your character can take and keep on fighting, really showcasing how truly heroic our characters are, and how death is more than just a roll of the dice, but a culmination of what your character is and what they have been through. Have you had a character die or suffer an injury in one of your games? What were their final moments like? What injuries did they succumb to, and how did that change their character? Let me know in the comments below. This game is so amazing, and I'll be talking about it a lot. If you want to learn more about this game or other TTRPGs, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so that way you don't miss out on any of my future uploads. Thank you for watching, keep that glass half full, and have a great next game. See you later.